Hello everybody and welcome to the Sovereign Village Project. This behind me is supposed to be a field, but it's a lake or a river right now. We've experienced very heavy flooding here in Middle Tennessee. In this county in particular, we've had a lot of really bad effects from this weekend's rain. And we've had a lot of bridges washed out, roads washed out, homes destroyed, of course trees down everywhere, a lot of water rescues, stranded families, and a lot of economic and property damage, and it's just wiped out fields. It's destroyed a lot of early crops and cover crops, and this is kind of a constant, and it's increasing not just here but globally. Flooding and massive erosion is just kind of the story of humanity right now, and it's because of the way we're treating the land. It's because we're doing stupid things with water, and it's actually affecting rain cycles. So it's a compounding effect where these rain events are getting bigger and bigger and bigger because we're messing up the rain cycle so much by logging off so many forests, which are responsible. Forests create rain, and we take them down, that transpiration stops, and suddenly we've stopped that water cycle. And then when it all comes at once, and the landscape is not ready to deal with it. And that's what's really happened here in this county, is that everyone gets really mad at the county for not being able to maintain the roads and fix them after all of this, but for once I'm not going to blame the county government. It's really on the landowners. Now, it does come back to the government because a lot of this comes from extension publications that taught people how to manage water on their land, which is basically shuck it away in the straightest line as fast as possible, get it off your property, dump it into a waterway. And that's what for a century or two people have been doing, is they've been dumping their water right in to the nearest waterway rather than utilizing it. And as a result, what would normally happen is, if you look at forest ground, it's designed to absorb water. It's not designed to shuck it away. Imagine water coming down onto this ground right here. As it rains, all of this woody organic matter is going to sop up a lot of that water, and then this good soil is going to just soak up more. I mean, it's porous, and these tree roots break up the soil and they open up openings for that water to sink down, recharge aquifers like it should, and of course it goes up into those trees and goes back up into the atmosphere and comes back down. You have a whole rain cycle, so you don't get these massive deluges all the time. But also, when it does happen, when you do have a lot of water, nature takes care of it. It doesn't dump it all into the nearest river as fast as possible and cause flooding. And obviously we have really messed up that cycle with the way we've treated the land. By taking that water, we take it in ditches and we steer it away from fields. People don't want muddy pastures. They don't want to deal with water on their land, especially when they can cheaply irrigate. So what they do is, many of us do, is we use fossil fuels to pump water up from somewhere else and then treat it chemically often, and then dump it on our land. But the water that actually God drops on our land in the form of rain, we just get rid of that, the purest good water. We get rid of that, take the chemical-filled water from somewhere else, use fossil fuels to bring it to us, and disperse it. All the while causing this massive flooding problem that is really, I mean, you think it's bad here. If you look at the third world, it's far, far worse because there's no protections at all for the environment, and there's so much slash and burn agriculture occurring that the problem is compounding so quickly. It's not good. But it's an easy fix. We could fix this at every level. We don't need government, although if government felt the need to get involved, they could, and they could help for a change. But all we need to do is stop this water and sink it into the ground. And I hate to get stereotypical with permaculture here, but the answer is swales. In most places, it's swales. It's a big ditch on contour, many of those. You make the initial investment in earth moving equipment, you get that done, you plant out a bunch of fruit trees, and then what's going to happen is that ditch isn't going to just stop and sink water, which then your trees will take up and just do really well, which, by the way, will make them more disease resistant, it'll make them grow faster, it'll make them able to take more challenges because they'll be healthier. But also, this is the stuff that's falling into that ditch. All this good organic matter that comes off these trees, the rain pushes it down. Right now we're pushing it all into our rivers and into the ocean and taking the fertility off of our land and out of our soil. We're creating a desert here while destroying our waterways and ocean. That should be going into the ground. It should be staying. So a good swale will stop the water, will stop the nutrients. The water will sink down. It'll go up. That energy that dropped onto your land, which is a gift, will go into your trees and produce abundant food. And so in our county, this would solve so many problems, because if you look at property lines on the edge of roads, there's always a ditch. Inevitably, there's a ditch coming off that property, and that's where the flood of water comes off. And I've driven all over the roads, all over the county after this flood event, and everywhere I see the same story. There's leaves and sticks and debris all pushed out onto the roads by these ditches coming off of people's property, because it's too much water, because it's a straight line. All the water that rains gets shucked off of their roofs, off of their buildings, off of their driveways, off of the landscape in general, and just taken away as fast as they can. It just goes the fastest route downhill. When really, with the swales, if we stop it, we sink it, when that swale overflows, there's a channel and it goes to the next swale and more sinks there. There's a lot of material like that. That woody material absorbs all of that water. But as it sinks down, it recharges the aquifers that we're so dependent on and destroying currently. Recharges those aquifers for future generations. And it stops the flood problem, or at least greatly lessens it, because we're just not dealing then with the same volumes of water coming off of people's land. It slows it down. In this county, that would also answer so many other problems we have. We have a huge obesity problem. At the same time, we have a food insecurity problem and multiple health problems, so many health problems in this county. And so if people had these earthworks and then they had the food forest planted below them, of course they're going to eat the abundant food that surrounds them then. So we could address all of these issues. We could help people with their income problems. This is a very poor county. Abundant food creates wealthy people. Good soil creates wealthy people. Good land creates wealthy people. We could solve those problems. We could stop the flooding. We could stop the destruction of our water cycles. We could restore our beautiful natural environment. And we could do this anywhere. We don't need government. We can just do it with earth moving equipment on our own land. It's a good investment in your land. It's a better investment than most things you would spend money on. It's sure better than a paper stock. Drop, $5 grand onto a pond and a swale system on your property. It will pay for the rest of your life and your children's lives and their lives after that. Ponds can last 5,000 years. There's cases of ponds older than that. So a few $1,000 on earth moving equipment, or even just a hand dug swale. I've done swales by hand too, and it's a lot of work, but it's a good physical challenge. It's kind of like running a marathon. You just look from one end of the property to the other and say, I wonder if I could dig a ditch across that with my own bare hands, and then you do it, and you feel really good afterwards. So this is the answer. This is the answer to a lot of problems. Permaculture is the answer in a lot of ways, but this specific technique is the answer to flooding. And the flooding is just going to get worse. It's going to get worse all over the U.S., and it's going to get just continually worse because we're still going to keep developing properties wrong. We're degrading property, and the runoff gets more and more every year. All that added on top of the fact that we're coming up into a climate cycle potentially that's going to dump a lot more rain, especially here in the southeast U.S. That remains to be seen if that will be the case, because there's a lot up in the air with the climate. But the climate's never static, it never has been, and it never will be. And we're not addressing those changes right now. All we're doing is causing massive destruction, and I'm kind of tired of seeing people die. Tired of seeing people's homes and lives destroyed. I'm tired of seeing cars underwater and campers underwater. I watched a camper float by. I watched a family standing on the roof of a car this weekend, and we pulled them out. That shouldn't have to happen. This county is losing so much money on these roads. If the government really wanted to do something, they could invest in little earth moving equipment and just lease it out or give it out for free. Just let people use it as long as it was for only swales, on contour, and ponds. If they did that, they would save themselves so many tens to hundreds of thousands of dollars, and they just wouldn't have to deal with so much maintenance on these roads because the water wouldn't be rushing out. It would also help in ice events because that water wouldn't be rushing out so much into the roads and then getting into cracks and expanding and causing potholes and problems like that. So I myself, I'm implementing these solutions on my property, which I'll then use as an example, but we're really starting to think about outreach. How do we bring this to the larger community? How do we make these solutions realistically happen? And so we're probably going to start with some example sites and try to do some community works projects, maybe in public parks or around schools and churches, and start showing people examples of this. And we're also going to be putting out articles in local media publications and probably talking to the council as well, because it's time for all of us to take these solutions into our own hands. The government's not going to fix it, and most people just don't have the education. They don't know how to do this. So let's all study up on some permaculture principles. Let's learn how to do this. Let's make these swales. Let's stop the flooding. Let's save lives. Let's make our world better. Everybody, stay safe, be well, and happy homesteading.